right, let's begin.
Let's do it.
Shall we? Mm-hmm. Hey you and welcome. My name is Mike and you're listening to the dulcet tones of the That Chapter podcast. Sitting across from me, Glenn Danzig impersonator, Keith, Dirty Keith.
Hello.
Wearing just a plain black t-shirt today.
Plain black today,
no
yeah.
Misfits logo or
Misfits today, no.
Adidas.
I have a Billy Talent cap though.
He does have his Billy Talent cap.
Yeah.
Very good. He's wearing
talent.
a Billy Talent snapback and he's wearing it reverse style for fashionistas who are listening.
Yeah, we're back into snapback season.
Spring is snapback season for old Keith over here.
It was a beanie season for a while there.
You had his black beanie, folks.
I did,
feel like you should have Keith's Fashion Corner. We got Mike's movie reviews and Keith's Fashion Talk.
Just black clothes.
Yeah.
That's it.
The 3 black t-shirts. All right. Today for you folks, we got a spooky. Ooh, spooky.
Man, I'm so excited to get into this one.
Yeah, it's good. This is going to be a good one. A spooky one and a fun one. Maybe even a night. Speaking actually of spooky, Keith, has your own spookster reappeared? The spookster of Dublin that haunts your house?
Yeah, man. Something spooky has happened in the house.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Because you haven't had any stories for me and the audience, like for about a couple of months now.
It has.
It was quiet.
It's been very quiet, and I think that's why it really took me off guard.
Okay.
So I was in the house on my own, and I was in my office.
In your office, which is above. So just for I just like to give people so they can visualize.
Okay.
Your house. Your office is above your front door.
Yes.
It's at the front of the house.
At the front of the house. Yes.
Yes.
So if you're looking at the house, you can see my office.
Yeah.
So I was in my office. I just started work, so my computer, nothing was on. So
this was in the morning.
In the morning, my wife and my daughter, they'd left for work and creche, and I went into my office. Nothing was on yet, so there was no electronic devices, nothing. And I went to the office. I was just about to set it up, and very clearly, I heard it was a woman's voice whispering my name.
Wow.
And it was very clearly like, Kate. And I checked my phone because I was like, oh, maybe I left my phone on. Like, you butt dial someone.
Yeah.
I was like, must have butt dialed my wife, and she was like, Keith, answer the phone. What are you doing?
Yeah.
No, my phone was fine. My laptop wasn't on. Nothing was on. Very clearly heard my name.
Wow.
And man, it caught me off guard. It was like, I was like, oh, that was weird.
Ooh.
It was spooky, but also because it was like first thing in the morning and it's a lot brighter out. It wasn't that spooky. But I felt if it had happened at like the middle of the night, 3 a.m. in the morning, it would really fucking freak me out.
Yeah.
But still very scary. It was weird. Yeah. So but we've heard a couple of voices in the house now.
Yeah, your wife heard you calling
my wife thought she heard me calling her.
Yeah.
But it wasn't me, because she came up the stairs like, what do you want?
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't call you. I was like, you called my name. I was like, no. And yeah, she heard me from upstairs calling out her name, and she went up to investigate, and yeah, no one's calling her name. So yeah, we've heard a couple of
It seems to be a lot on the second story, because your daughter has seen something in your office when you're driving by. Told you before.
Yeah.
And then when you were going up the stairs, she saw a being's feet.
Yes.
That disappeared.
Yeah.
Fuck your eyes.
Weird. Yeah.
I don't like it. I mean, I do like it, but
Yeah.
it's scary.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's cool.
It is cool. It is pretty cool.
But so that's that was a bit spooky. But,
Yeah, that is a spook.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, folks, stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I'll let you know, man.
Keep an eye out for the next one. Well, today we're crossing the Irish Sea from Keith's spooky haunted house in Dublin to spooky Victorian London, if you can believe that. A city steeped in fog, filth, and fear. Think Hello, Gavna, Dracula,
Yep.
Jack the Ripper,
Yep.
STD-ridden prostitutes, all Murder Most Foul, all of my favorite things.
What more do you want? And it also gives you a really good chance to, perfect your accent.
All right, mate. Let's get into it. Today we're actually talking about the legend of Saucy Jack, Spring-Heeled Jack.
Yep.
A character who is still very much up for debate.
Oh, big time,
If you can believe it, was he a ghost, a demon, a cryptid, a bored aristocrat with too much time on his hands? Some even claim he was an alien.
Yeah.
Let the record show him doing the tented fingers alien thing. Truth is, no one really knows. But there's a lot of real reports about a frightening character in Victorian London. And some say he was everything a combination of everything I listed above. A jack of all trades. A spring-heeled jack of all trades, if you will. So that's right, folks. Today we're heading back to foggy 1830s London to talk about the legend, the myth, the chaos demon of Slanesh that is Spring-Heeled Jack.
Nice.
Was that? How's my English accent?
You started off a bit Australian, but
Okay.
but you found your way.
Thank you. All right. Don't let the name fool you, by the way. He wasn't just, as I said, some spooky tale whispered over candlelight. He clawed his way into public consciousness and sent London into a moral panic, becoming the stuff of nightmares. Tall, sharp-clawed, flame-breathing, and capable of leaping entire rooftops in a single bound, spring-heeled Jack left a trail of confusion and fear in his wake. So, who or what was he? Let's give it a go. So the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack is a fascinating mess.
It is.
Yeah, God bless Keith, by the way, who did all the research for today's episode. May the good Lord bless you, because you did a hell of a job.
It was a lot of fun digging into it, but man, there's so much facts intertwined with myth and legend, and you're trying to decipher what's real and what's not. So, but it's a lot of fun. It's great.
Yeah. We will be going through and saying what's bullshit and what's maybe real. So we'll get into the whole thing. Yeah. So reports of Spring-Heeled Jack's antics sprang from 1837 to 1904, if you can believe that, which is surprisingly recent. But the deeper you dig, the murkier things become. Some tales of Jack were pure fiction that ended up slipping into the official canon, while others blended fact and fantasy so seamlessly that later writers just simply went along with them. Even the so-called facts from the newspapers were questionable. This was in an era that thrived on moral panics, after all. Then there was the penny dreadfuls, those cheap lurid booklets that turned Jack into a full-blown horror villain right alongside Sweeney Todd and Varney the Vampire. If he wasn't already a supernatural terror leaping over rooftops, the tabloids and Pulp Fiction certainly turned him into one. Now, Spring-Heeled Jack wasn't just a London boogeyman. He was a full-blown nationwide menace. His attacks stretched from the dark alleys of the East End of London all the way to the English countryside, where terrified witnesses described a fiend with blazing eyes, metallic claws, and an unnatural ability to leap impossible distances. The scariest of all.
Right?
His most infamous attack came in February of 1938 when Jane Alsop opened her front gate to a man claiming to be a buzzer. Wait, no, what do you call it?
What? A bobby?
A bobby, that's the word. He was going to be a bobby. He demanded a light, claiming that he had just caught Saucy Jack, Spring-Heeled Jack himself. However, the moment Jane handed over the candle, he threw off his cloak, revealing a monstrous face, tight-fitting white suit, and a glowing chest piece. Then, with a scream, he lunged, breathing blue fire, slashing at her with talons and trying to drag her away. Jane barely escaped with her life. That same month, Lucy Scales was also blinded by a blast of blue flames as she walked through Green Dragon Alley in London. She collapsed in a fit of hysteria as her attacker vanished into the night. Meanwhile, in Turner Street, a servant boy opened the door to a sinister cloaked figure who revealed his horrifying features before once again fleeing into the night. And hearing these sorts of stories, which we'll dig into, London full-blown panic mode. Every shadow in the gas-lit streets seemed to hide Jack's ghastly form. Every gust of wind sounded like his eerie, mocking laughter. Boing.
Boing.
Stories spread like wildfire. Some swore they saw him bounding across rooftops, while others claimed he lurked in graveyards, waiting to pounce. Bobbies were ordered to keep a watchful eye on the dark corners of the city, but Jack was a master of the vanishing acts. One leap and he was boing, gone yet again. By the 1840s, his exploits stretched across England, terrifying everyone from blacksmiths to coachmen. Some believed he was a deranged nobleman playing elaborate pranks. Others swore he was something much worse. In 1845, he reportedly turned murderous, grabbing a woman named Maria Davis and hurling her into a sewer. Witnesses described his glowing red eyes and twisted grin as he watched her struggle before slipping away into the fog. Jack's antics took a military twist in 1877 when he began tormenting soldiers at Aldershot barracks. Some soldiers fired upon him, the bullets having no effect. Some claimed he had an armoured chest plate. Others whispered that no mortal weapon could harm him. Either way, he was never caught. By the turn of the century, he reappeared in Liverpool, vaulting over rooftops and knocking over pedestrians. His final act came in broad daylight. He sprang 25 feet into the air, if you can believe that, letting out a mocking laughter and vanishing forever.
He was gone.
And so, let's ask ourselves, was there any truth to these stories or were they just wildly exaggerated? Well, let's get into it, why don't we?
That's it. Like, that's the legend that if you know about Spring Hill Jack, that might be what you're familiar with. So let's break it down. Let's start from the very beginning.
Yeah, break it down for us.
Let's break it down. So I guess like London it's no stranger to phantoms roaming its streets and getting up to all sorts of shenanigans. One such example is the Hammersmith ghost. So a case that we actually covered a while back.
It was one of our first ones we covered together, if you
One
can
of the
believe
very
that.
first ones,
Yeah. Oh, when we were just babes in the podcasting world.
With the Hammersmith ghost, so this happened in 1803, so rumours had spread across the city and the spirit of Hammersmith, it became something of a harbinger of doom. Adding to the hysteria, several people claimed to have encountered a ghost, some reported fainting or suffering severe shock after being physically attacked. There were even tales of people dying from fright. By 1804, the Hammersmith ghost had become a community-wide obsession. Groups of armed men they began patrolling the streets, determined to capture the spectral menace. Tragically though, on January 3rd, 1804, a local bricklayer walking near Black Line Lane, just north of the River Thames, he was mistaken for the ghost. You see, he had been wearing his work clothes, which were entirely white, and a self-appointed ghost hunter, thinking he was dealing with the real deal, an apparition, he shot him dead. So the shooter, he was initially convicted of murder, but the sentence that was later reduced to manslaughter, sparing him the death penalty. But even after the shooting, sightings of the Hammersmith ghost, they continued, right up until the late 1830s, when Spring Hill Jack leapt into the public imagination.
Welcome to the party, pal. Here he comes. The origins of Jack's lore kick off in Barnes, a village just southwest of London, back in 1837. Reports started doing the rounds about some, weird creature described as either a ghost, imp, or devil, and some people swore it looked like a large white bull or bear. As bizarre as it sounds, it wasn't too out there for the time. Folk did genuinely believe in evil spirits that could shapeshift into animals to hide their true selves. It wasn't long though before reports of the spectre escalated from eerie but harmless sightings into full-on vicious attacks. As the spirit evolved from a strange white bull or bear into the shape of a man, a carpenter named Jones claimed he was attacked by a ghostly figure clad in armor and red shoes. When Jones tried to fight back in what can only be described as a mega bitch move, two more ghosts jumped in and beat the absolute shite of him. The ghost had his boys with him. You ready to take him out?
Get him, boys.
Get him! Yeah.
That's just rude.
Yeah.
This was just the start of very similar reports. So a blacksmith and a few women, they claimed that they were attacked by a devilish figure with glowing red eyes and iron claws that shredded at their clothes. In another encounter, the spooky git, it leapt in front of a carriage. It freaked out the horses and it caused the whole carriage to crash. Witnesses said that the attacker made its escape by casually leaping over a 9-foot wall like it was absolutely nothing, which is where apparently the nickname Spring Hill Jack is believed to have come from.
That's where it... interesting. In October 1837, a young woman named Mary Stevens was walking to Lavender Hill, where she worked as a servant, after visiting her parents in Battersea. As she made her way to work, a strange figure suddenly leapt at her from a dark alley. He seized her in a tight grip, immobilizing her, then began to kiss her face while tearing at her clothes and running his clawed fingers over her skin. According to her deposition, his claws were cold and clammy, as those of a corpse. Mary's screams sent the attacker fleeing into the night, as the commotion drew several nearby residents who quickly launched a search for the assailant, but he'd vanished without a trace. As the stories kept piling up, Jack's appearance and antics, they got more and more elaborate. Rumors even claimed people were dropping dead from fright. But there's no solid proof anyone actually died during this time, so it's probably just a bit of a classic Victorian exaggeration. The London newspapers chalked it all up to good old servant girl gossip, and any proper police investigations turned up nothing. Everything they heard was always, a friend of a friend of a friend heard something, those kind of stories, all rumors and that kind of thing.
Second-hand accounts. Yeah.
However, even though they thought it was complete bollocks, that didn't stop the papers from printing it because people are going to read it. It sells.
It's just a good read.
Yeah. In fact, they even lent into the drama, reporting the rumors that a young group of noblemen were behind it all as part of a twisted bet. Apparently, a few upper-class rascals had made a £5,000 wager to destroy the lives of 30 people. Specifically, 8 old bachelors, 10 old maids, 6 ladies' maids, and as many servant girls as they could scare into madness and insanity. The rumour gained so much traction that a concerned local wrote to Sir John Cowan, the Lord Mayor of London, saying, "Some individuals have laid a wager with a mischievous and foolhardy companion that he that he durst not take upon himself the task of visiting many of the villages near London in 3 disguises, a ghost, a bear, and a devil. And moreover, that he will not dare to enter gentlemen's gardens for the purpose of alarming the inmates." Why did they write stupid in old timies? I'm not a fan. I'm sorry.
I know, yeah. Get it right.
Get it right. Write it so people 200 years in the future will understand what you're saying, goddammit.
You're English. Use English.
Yeah. The wager has, however, been accepted, and the unmanly villain has succeeded in depriving 7 ladies of their senses. At one house, he rung the bell, and on the servant coming to open the door, this worse than brute stood in no less dreadful figure than a spectre clad most perfectly. The consequence was that the poor girl immediately swooned, and has never from that moment been in her senses, but, on seeing any man, screams out most violently, "Take him away!" There are 2 ladies, which your lordship will regret to hear, who have husbands and children who are not expected to recover, but likely to become a burden on their families.
It's so harsh.
I know. These dumb women got scared into half to death, and now they're going to be a pain in the ass for their husbands.
Now what are we going to do with it?
Yeah. The Lord Mayor suspected these stories were getting blown out of proportion, but with public panic reaching new heights, he ordered the police to investigate anyway. At the time, he probably thought it would be an easy job. After all, the trouble was mostly happening in small villages outside of London, and it was likely the work of pranksters like these rich noblemen rascals, unmanly villains. But Jack, saucy Jack, had other plans. Not long after the Lord Mayor ordered the police to investigate the reports, the first truly detailed report of Spring-Heeled Jack's attacks emerged. On the evening of Tuesday, February 20th, 1838, he appeared at Bearbinder Cottage on the outskirts of Old Ford and brutally attacked Jane Alsop. This was different from previous encounters. Before now, most victims had been from the lower class, but Jane came from a wealthy family, which meant her case was taken far more seriously. When Jane and her father reported the attack to Lambeth Street Police, it sparked a media frenzy. Her chilling account got printed in numerous London papers, including the Times on February 22nd, and became central to the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack. Here is the following report given to the police by Jane Alsop. Take it away!
This is a great report, by the way. So, at about 8:45, I heard a violent ringing at the gate at the front of the house. When I went to see what was the matter, I saw a man standing outside. I asked him what was wrong and told him not to ring so loudly. He instantly replied that he was a policeman and said, "For God's sakes, bring me a light, for we have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane." I ran inside to fetch a candle and handed it to him. He was wearing a long cloak at first. I truly believed that he was a policeman. But the moment I gave him the candle, he threw off his cloak. He brought the light to his chest, revealing a hideous, monstrous face. He then vomited blue and white flames from his mouth, and his eyes burned with red balls of fire.
Hell yeah.
From the brief glimpse I had, I saw he wore a large helmet and a tight-fitting outfit that looked like white oilskin. Without saying a word, he lunged at me, grabbing my dress and wrapping his arm around my neck. He forced my head under his arm and began tearing at my gown with his claws, which felt like they were made of metal. I screamed as loud as I could and fought to break free. Somehow, I managed to escape and ran towards the house, but he chased me down and caught me again against the steps. He scratched at my arms and neck, even ripping hair from my head. I thought I was done for, until my sister appeared and finally pulled me from his grasp. I suffered terribly through the night from the shock and the pain of my wounds. My arms, my shoulder, my neck still aches from the claws, or whatever they were.
Ooh. Yeah, that is a pretty frightening attack. Yeah.
I like the part where he's like vomiting blue flames. That's awesome.
That does rock them. The Alsop attack was taken very seriously and led to 2 investigations. One by the Metropolitan Police and another by James Lee, one of the best detectives in London at the time. Lee, who was famous for solving the notorious Red Barn murder, wasted no time digging into the case. And he quickly discovered that someone matching Jack's description had been lurking around the area for weeks, terrifying locals, and had even narrowly escaped capture by displaying some ye old parkour. Lee believed Jane Alsop's story, but figured the attacker wasn't a devil or a ghost, just a regular mortal man. But of course, the police would say that, wouldn't they?
That's what they want you to think.
I want to believe. That's what I want. In the end, the authorities dismissed the idea of a fire-breathing demon crawling out of the pits of hell, unfortunately. Instead, they chalked it up to a drunken prank gone wrong. Because, a little bit of old assault and attempted rape was just good old, it's a bit of fun back then, you know? The good old days.
Get over it.
Yeah. The police even brought in 2 men for questioning, a bricklayer named Payne and a carpenter named Milbank. A witness had spotted these 2 men walking away from the Alsop house around the time of the incident. Milbank, in particular, stood out. He'd been wearing a white hat and a white shooting jacket, which Lee believed could have been mistaken for the white oilskin garment that Jane Alsop described Spring-Heeled Jack wearing. The same witness also reported overhearing them boasting about being Spring-Heeled Jack in a local pub that very night, which is
That'll do it. Yeah.
Shit. Yeah, that's pretty incriminating.
You're
Yeah,
right, yeah.
that'll kind of wrap this one up. Yeah. However, when interrogated, both Payne and Milbank, unsurprisingly, denied everything. In fact, the only thing they admitted to was being so blackout drunk they barely remembered the night at all. That good old, so drunk, it was a wild night last night. I think I had like 4 or 5 pints.
Maybe I turned into a demon. I don't know. I can't remember.
I fucking could have shot blue flames out of my arse. I was so drunk, you know?
A goddamn kebab. So unfortunate for Detective Lee, this directly contradicted Jane's account. She was absolutely certain that her attacker had not been drunk at all. So on top of that, there was no actual evidence to charge these men. Then, as more eyewitnesses came forward, things only got messier. So each statement conflicted with the next, pointing fingers at different men, and these wildly inconsistent reports, they just muddied the water. Unfortunately, in the end, the investigation, it just led absolutely nowhere.
But old Spring-Heeled Jack wasn't going to stop. 5 days after Jane's terrifying encounter, Spring-Heeled Jack was back at it again, this time in the East End. He showed up at the door of 2 Turner Street, not far from Old Fort. When the servant boy answered, Jack drew off his cloak, revealing a face that could only be described as a nightmare. The boy screamed so loudly that Jack just fled the scene, leaving the poor lad traumatized but alive. And it wasn't long before Jack struck again. And just as a little side note, this is the generally accepted as Jack's last appearance, his last true quote-unquote appearance, or at least of these series of events.
Yeah, I guess like the last official one that police were investigating and took it seriously.
Yeah. This was on the evening of February 28, 1838. 18-year-old Lucy Scales and her sister had just finished visiting their butcher brother in London's Limehouse district. As they passed by Green Dragon Alley at around 8:30 p.m, they noticed a man standing at the entrance. Dressed in a long, dark cloak, he waited until the sisters were close. Then, without warning, he lunged at Lucy and vomited blue flames directly into her face. Blinded and terrified, Lucy collapsed into violent seizure-like fits.
Now, like, unlike his previous attack, Spring-Heeled Jack, he actually never laid a hand on them. Apart from, vomiting into her face.
Vomiting blue flames into her face, yeah.
But he didn't, start tearing. So he just, he's just simply turned and walked away. I guess he was like, nah, job done.
Yeah.
Lucy, she was rushed home and a surgeon was called to attend to her. Her description of Jack, it closely matched Jane Alsop's. He was tall, thin, he dressed like a gentleman, wearing a large cloak and a headpiece that she said resembled a bonnet, which I guess could have also, because Jane said it looked like he was wearing a helmet. So there was some sort of headpiece going on.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Maybe an alien, who knows?
Maybe. Sounds kind of like an alien. Lucy, like Jane, reported the attack to the magistrates at Lambeth Street, and Officer Lee inspected the scene. But with no evidence, once again, and no witnesses, there wasn't much of an investigation. These were the attacks that laid the groundwork for the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack. And, thanks to the media, all of London was buzzing with his name. People just couldn't get enough of him. Unfortunately, this also meant a wave of copycats jumping on the old Jack bandwagon and started using his name as an excuse to do whatever the hell they wanted.
Oh, and how did they use it? So, sometime between February 28 and March 1st, 1838, a gently dressed man strolled into White Lion Pub in Vere Street, casually introduced himself as Spring-Heeled Jack, and then he whipped out a club and took a swing at the landlady. So it was just like, hey, I'm Jack. So luckily he missed. Elsewhere, a cloaked figure in Lincoln's Inn Fields. He grabbed the woman and he just slapped her across the face.
Wow, jeez Louise. Over in Islington, a blacksmith named James Priest went on an absolute rampage, attacking several women before finally getting thrown in jail for 3 months. Meanwhile, 2 tall men in black clothes smeared ochre on their faces to terrify some poor kid in Westmoreland Mews. Not to be outdone, a youth named Daniel Granville was caught in Kentish Town wearing a mask with a blue glazed paper at the mouth, which was his attempt at imitating Jack's fiery breath. He got off with a warning, but another imitator, James Painter, wasn't so lucky. He was fined £4 for parading around Kilburn in a bearded mask and a sheet. Man, it's like everybody's cosplaying.
Right,
Yeah.
I guess I just thought, like, I'll get away with it. I'll just throw a sheet over and I can go touch up some women. And they'll just blame Jack.
They won't recognise it's me.
I'll put a beard on.
Yeah. By early April, the chaos in London started to settle down. But Jack fever had already spread beyond the city. A woman in Southend was attacked on the cliffs by some gentlemen who threw her to the ground, tore at her clothes, and shoved grass in her mouth. Now, aside from the clothes ripping, this had little in common with Jack's usual antics. But that didn't stop the local paper from slapping a sensational headline on it, "Spring-heeled Jack at Southend."
To be fair to the newspapers though, so they weren't the only ones cashing in on the sudden popularity of this mysterious cryptid demon. Spring-heeled Jack, he was quickly becoming a bit of an urban legend. So alongside his frequent appearances in the press, there was pamphlets detailing his exploits. They were flood the streets. Cheap theatres, they staged dramatic retellings of his attacks, which is mad to think. Like there's people out there that are like physically assaulting women and they're like, let's put a play on about it.
Yeah.
So around this time, the first melodrama based on the legend Spring-heeled Jack debuted in the Royal Pavilion Theatre, bringing the infamous figure to life on stage.
Wow. For the next few decades, Jack, though, seemed to vanish. Sure, his name still popped up in newspapers and a couple of pub stories, but nothing major enough to kick off another full-blown police investigation. That said, there was one particularly dramatic tale from November 12th, 1845. According to the story, a sex worker named Maria Davis was attacked in broad daylight on a bridge over Follies Ditch, which was an open sewer because it was Victorian London. Witnesses claimed that Jack spat blue and white flames into her face before throwing her off the bridge into the basically open sewer where she drowned, which sounds pretty on brand for Jack, classic Jack.
Yeah.
But there was one problem. There was no coroner's reports, no police records, no death certificates. Nothing supported the idea that this actually happened. This sounds like one of those stories that just game a telephone.
So we can actually thank Peter Haining for that. So in 1977, so over a century later from this, Haining, he published a book called The Legend and Bizarre Crimes of Spring-heeled Jack. And this was the first full-length book on the legend. And for a while it became the go-to resource on Jack. But when people started asking for proof of the Maria Davis case, Haining's response was a little sus. So this is what he said. "I'm afraid that all my research material for the book was loaned to a scriptwriter who was planning a film around the character. This was some years ago, and all my efforts to trace him have subsequently proved elusive as the subject of the story himself."
Ooh, so imaginary scriptwriter ran away with all my notes.
Pretty much. It's the equivalent of like the dog ate my homework.
Yeah.
Chances are Haining, he concocted the whole idea from, there's a woodcut showing 2 men on a boat apparently recovering a sex worker's body from Folly Ditch, where he was saying that Maria Davis was found, but you know, who knows? Maybe he did, and maybe this did happen, but
we'll never know for sure.
Know. Yeah.
So after this alleged, quote-unquote, murder, Jack's sightings, they started dying down once again until the 1870s, which is crazy. It's like 30 years later, kicks back up again. In 1872, the News of the World reported that Peckham was losing its mind over a mysterious, terrifying figure they dubbed the Peckham Ghost. The paper claimed that this was actually Spring-heeled Jack, back for more chaos. Ooh. Witnesses described him as tall, dressed in white and having a flaming face. Oh, and of course he could leap over fences like an absolute parkour madman. Meanwhile, over in Sheffield, locals reported a park ghost, which, big surprise, also got linked to Spring-heeled Jack. At this point, if anything even remotely spooky happened, people were slap that bad boy Jack's name on. This bad boy's good to go. Chalk it up to Saucy Jack yet again. Now, up until now, Jack had mostly been content with terrorizing and assaulting women, which is bad enough. But I mean, he hasn't attacked men, so it's fine, really. Yeah. But in March of 1877, he decided to, level up. Let the record show him doing the cloud thing from Final Fantasy VII when he spins his sword. And he took on the British Army. Rumors started swirling at the Aldershot military camp, which is a massive British Army base that a ghostly figure was snooping around, covert-like.
Snoop around.
At the outlying sentry posts, scaring the absolute shit out of soldiers on duty. On March 17th, the local military newspaper, which has an amazing name, Sheldrake's Aldershot and Sandhurst Military Gazette. They love a good name.
It rolls off the tongue. Really.
Yeah, exactly. They basically wrote this little amazing piece of journalism. Quote, "Someone or other appears to have made up his mind to play some rather questionable pranks with the soldiers at this camp while on night duty. About a week ago, a sentry was on duty at the North Camp. And, about midnight, someone approached him, refusing to answer the usual challenge of, 'Who goes there?' After dodging about the sentry box in fantastic fashion for some little time, he made off with astonishing swiftness. Not, however, before the sentry loaded his rifle and fired. But without any effect. Ooh.
Okay.
No bullets, baby. He's bulletproof. And now Jack the lad wasn't done yet. He returned to spook another sentry, this time near the camp cemetery. Once again, bang! The soldier fired his rifle, but once again, didn't Jack Dunn vanish into the night completely unharmed?
Okay.
Now things are getting interesting. By April, the Military Gazette and even the Times had jumped on the story, much like Jack Boing, reporting multiple encounters. Then, just as suddenly as he arrived, he's gone.
Like a fart in the wind.
Yeah.
Or so they thought. So because according to the Illustrated Police News, which, to be honest, wasn't exactly the pinnacle of journalistic integrity, Jack came back for more chaos at the end of the summer. A bit of context, so the Illustrated Police News was basically the Victorian version of a trashy tabloid. It specialised in gruesome crime stories, and it was famous for its dramatic woodcut illustrations for murders, rapes, and general mayhem. Jack
Sounds like a YouTube channel.
Right. Jack, he actually made the cover of this news article 3 times in 1877 alone. Good for him.
Wow.
This time
he got them those clicks.
Right. It's all about the content, man. This time he was up to his old tricks again. So, according to the newspaper, and this is a quote, his method of proceeding seems to be to approach an unobserved post, then climb the sentry box and pass his hand, which is arranged to feel as cold and clammy as that of a corpse, over the face of a soldier.
What? Creepy.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine just stand there and then a cold, clammy hand just rubs your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, not very nice.
Ooh.
So by August 31st, 1877, Jack made his boldest move yet, sneaking all the way to the powder room in North Camp, because nothing says fun ghostly prank like messing around near a literal stockpile of explosives. So after nearly scaring the poor guard to death with his deathly cold hands, Jack, he just hopped away again into the fog, leaving behind yet another batch of terrified soldiers.
The last alleged sighting of Jack took place in Liverpool. According to several secondary sources, Jack popped up on William Henry Street in late September 1904, where he treated hundreds of startled onlookers to a show. The Liverpool Daily Post, in a rather dramatic account published in 1967, described the event in full, and this was published, 63 years after the actual initial event. So here we go, quote, "In September 1904, the springing terror made his last appearance, this time in William Henry Street, where hundreds of local folk watched in awe as the pathetic creature leapt up and down the length of Everton Street. After more than 10 minutes of leaps, which would embarrass present-day Olympic high jumpers, and pole vaulters too, he was seen to jump clean over the terraced houses from Stitt Street to Hay Street, and then hopped back across the slate roofs to Salisbury Street, after which he was never seen again." And so, after decades of ambushing women, slapping soldiers, and causing all-around chaos, Jack was ready, apparently, to hang up his spring-heeled boots. And so, who was Jack? Well, even at the time of his first attacks, most people didn't think spring-heeled Jack was a supernatural being, just some lunatic, or group of them, with a very twisted sense of humor. Many remember, including the writer of that letter to the Lord Mayor, the unmanly villain. They basically suspected a gang of wealthy young noblemen were pulling a prank for a wager, having a larf.
Yeah.
And chief amongst the suspects was the Marquess of Waterford, which is a pretty interesting fellow.
Yeah.
The Marquess of Waterford had a reputation for drunken brawls, violent practical jokes, and elaborate bets. And if you've ever heard the phrase, paint the town red, that comes from him. Literally comes from him. He and his buddies once went on a drunken rampage, and they began smearing red paint on buildings, pubs, and even one unlucky policeman who tried to stop them. He also wasn't exactly known for his respect towards women. Stories suggest he liked to jump out at travellers just to scare them, and we know he was in London right around the time of Jack's first reported attacks. With his wealth and resources, he could have certainly kitted himself out in some kind of like bizarre costume and his bonnet and his oilskin things, and he had all the props, basically. He was a anti-Batman.
The anti-Batman, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of like if the Joker had Batman's means.
Yes, yeah. And I guess like Jack's activity, like it did drop off around 1839, which could mean the Marquess and his cronies either got, bored or spooked by all the press and the police attention. The later reports of Jack, they were likely copycats, or just like mass hysteria taking on a life of its own. Either way, if the Marquess was the original Jack, he couldn't have been behind the later attacks. But it's definitely kind of seems like he might have been part of the original ones. But by 1842, he apparently turned over a new leaf. He married, he settled down in County Waterford, and he lived a shockingly respectful life right up until he died in a riding accident in 1859.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's not a bad place. Waterford is beautiful.
I love Waterford. Yeah.
I do. I used to spend summers down there as a kid in good old Dunmore East.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's a lovely spot actually.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So that's one possible identity for old spring-heeled Jack and his saucy actions. And speaking of mass hysteria and copycats, as Jack's legend grew, everyday crimes, assaults, hooliganism, and general thuggery started getting lumped in with his story. While terrifying for the victims, these weren't necessarily out of the ordinary. But if a criminal threw in some swung their cape, around and laughed manically, well, suddenly, didn't he just have a pair of spring-heeled boots on?
Yeah.
It was Saucy Jack himself.
Just like assaults a woman does a spicy jump. And
Yeah.
This is Jack!
Yeah, Jackie's back again! Now, not all journalists were convinced, but others, they weren't so skeptical. Take the Illustrated Police News, the fine publication that we mentioned earlier, a publication that loved a good crime story, especially if it could be exaggerated for maximum drama. Some of the more colourful accounts of Jack's escapades can be traced literally to its pages. Then there were the plays and the Penny Dreadfuls. These cheap and sensational stories, they kept Jack alive in the public imagination long after the initial attacks. So that's why, there was such a long gap between his attacks, because basically there was like movies on about him.
Right, yeah.
Back in the day. So people were, he's here. He's back again. He's just one of those urban legends that just keeps on giving.
That's it.
You know what I mean? The play Spring-Heeled Jack, or The Felon's Wrongs, was staged in 1863, while in 1867, that saw the release of the penny dreadful Spring-Heeled Jack, The Terror of London, a romance of the 19th century. It's very romantic. Another 40-part penny dreadful was published in 1863 and reprinted in 1867. More stories followed into the 1880s and beyond, right in time for new waves of sightings. And around this time, you had like Jack the Ripper going around this time as well, so there was all this like spooky gothic horror, and Dracula came out around this time. Like, this was definitely a time for spooky horror.
Yeah.
Sort of when like horror was almost kind of like invented.
It was great,
as we know it.
The Penny Dreadfuls are, I actually read a good few of them. And at the start, he's obviously the villain, but then later on, they kind of make him like a Robin Hood. You know what I mean? Like, he's this like kind of cryptid demon being who goes out and he actually he's for the little man, It's wild. They're good reads. They're good reads.
All right. Folks, check him out. Keith gives him a 2 thumbs up. Yeah.
But I'll definitely be they have some amazing photographs. I'm definitely going to be putting so many on the Instagram page.
The Instagram. Yeah. Put a couple of posts up on the Instagram. I want to see these.
I'm going to put them all there. Well, not them all there. It's like thousands, but I'll put up the good ones.
Put up the good ones.
There's some amazing ones. But I guess like even just speaking of hysteria, there's even like some completely unrelated events that were folded into the Jack's legend as well. So take the final sighting of Jack in Liverpool in 1904 when he was hopping around like a madman. So this was likely the work of a mentally ill man, not a supernatural terror. So decades later, after this was reported, a lifelong Liverpudlian named Miss Pierpont, she recalled that Jack was just a troubled man suffering from religious mania. And he had a habit of climbing onto rooftops screaming, "My wife is the devil!" Which it could be true.
Yeah.
Which, while unsettling, isn't exactly the work of an unearthly terror. And kind of what we were talking about beforehand, the last sighting was in 1904, but it wasn't written about till like the 1960s.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was just one of those stories where it was the guy up on the roof, and then that over time, the legend, and then eventually it was a Spring Hill Jack, and
Yeah.
he bounding over houses. Like,
Yeah, when he's just the local crazy man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Then there is the question of Jack's bizarre abilities. His enormous leaps, his fire breathing, his metal claws, and his apparent immunity to bullets. And that has led some people to wonder if he was something other than human. Later writers have even suggested maybe he was an alien, possibly from a high-gravity planet, which could explain his athleticism, or a demon summoned, deliberately or accidentally, by Aleister Crowley or some kind of Victorian occultists, because they were mad into that.
They did love that shit.
Back in the 19th century, though, most people assumed Jack was flesh and blood. That said, the frequent references to him as a ghost or devil suggest at least some believed his powers weren't entirely of this world. But is there a rational explanation for the more outrageous feats attributed to him? Well, his fiery breath. Let's start there. The simplest explanation for that was that he was using a fire-breathing trick like they do at circuses and carnivals. He filled his mouth with some kind of flammable liquid and spat it out. In both attacks on Jane Alsop and Lucy Scales, Jack needed a flame to pull off his stunt. He asked Jane for a candle, and he was holding a lamp when he assaulted Lucy. So in both cases, he also reportedly held the flame at chest level, exactly as a fire breather would. The police at the time, they even consulted circus performers, suspecting, some kind of carny was at work yet again.
Oh, I was also reading somewhere as well when he went to the circus workers.
Yeah.
And they were explaining, like, to get that blue flame, you need to mix, they called it wine, but I think it was just like a very high percentage alcohol.
Yeah.
With sulfur to kind of get that blue flame. And like some of the reports, that's why they said it was a demon, because it very strong smell of sulfur, as if he was coming out of the pits of hell. But it was actually part of his fire breathing he needed.
Right.
But it's also very unlikely that Jack actually breathed fire directly on the victims' faces. Like, if he had, the injuries would have been far worse. Yet, neither Jane nor Lucy, they suffered burns. And Lucy, she'd only been temporarily blinded. So if Jack, he really did breathe fire, the more dramatic reports of him vomiting flames onto people's faces were more likely exaggerations.
Right. And what about his leaping ability? Old Spring-Heeled Jack is famous for his spring heels. Jack's reputation as a superhuman jumper, that didn't develop overnight. In the early reports, he's described as quick and agile, but his feats of leaping weren't as dramatic as they later would become. In fact, sometimes he didn't leap at all. After attacking Lucy Scales, he simply walked away. And after Jane Alsop's attacks, he scampered across the fields.
That's such a funnier image.
Yeah.
Like, after the assault, it was like struggling getting over a fence. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, my cape is stuck.
His gravity-defying jumps became more prominent in later stories. This could have been a case of exaggeration, either from the public, as in the 1904 Liverpool case, or from the press, as seen in the Illustrated Police News's highly sensationalized accounts. Some of Jack's most spectacular acrobatics don't appear until years after the events they supposedly describe.
Now, I know what you're saying. The clue is in the name. He has springs in his shoes. But that's pretty unlikely. So the springs, first of all, they wouldn't have been powerful enough to launch a man over houses. And they'd only be effective on like firm, even ground. And many of Jack's supposed exploits, they took place in rough parkland or muddy fields or narrow alleys with cobblestones and uneven country roads. So if he did perform such remarkable jumps, it would have been more likely down to natural agility other than this like steampunk style gadgetry. Like if you're in a pile of mud and you try to jump, your heels are going to sink into the mud.
Yeah, exactly. His metal talons, that's easy to explain. He just made his own Wolverine claws. More puzzling, though, is his supposed ability to deflect bullets after he was shot at twice at the military base. The famous Aldershot army base case, when he was fired, that's fueled like so much speculation. How can he, withstand bullets, whatever they used back then? But the truth is far less mysterious, unfortunately, folks. When Jack first showed up at the base, the guards were simply using blanks in their rifles. By the time they switched to live ammunition in April 1887, he was just lucky enough to escape. Most likely due to poor marksmanship rather than supernatural invulnerability.
It was also suggested that whoever was messing with the army base during this time may have actually been a soldier, or at least had inside knowledge of the workings of the base. So the reason for this is due to the fact that, Spring-Heeled Jack, he vanished after April when the soldiers switched to live ammunition.
Yeah.
Only to reappear then in August, just as the order to shoot on sight had been lifted.
He was definitely one of the boys.
Yeah, just messing around.
Yeah. So after the Liverpool sightings, Spring-Heeled Jack seemed to fade into history, slipping comfortably into his new role as an urban legend. But was that really the end of him? It seems Jack didn't retire, he just went travelling. Reports of mysterious leaping figures can be found in folklore from many corners of the world. Of the reported figures similar to Spring-Heeled Jack, one of the most striking is the Black Flash, or Phantom, of Provincetown, which we were just in recently with the case of Tony Costa, the Cape Cod vampire. Between 1938 and 1945, this eerie figure terrorized locals in ways so uncannily similar to Jack's, it must have been a hoax inspired by the Victorian boogeyman. Am I right? One journalist, a Mitchell Smythe, travel editor of the Toronto Star, interviewed people who can still recall the Phantom, the Black Flash of Provincetown. They were still alive when this figure was there. Smythe, he first encountered the story while vacationing on Cape Cod. He picked up a local history booklet, New England's Mad and Mysterious Men, by Robert Cahill. According to Cahill, the Black Flash of Provincetown dressed in, well, black, and had eyes like balls of flame, and was big. Real big, standing somewhere between, that's the quote.
You're a writer.
yeah. How big is he? Real big. And he was standing somewhere between 6 and 8 feet tall. He first appeared in autumn 1938 and haunted Provincetown during the off-season, October to March, until December 1945. He attacked both men and women, never inflicting serious injuries, but displayed all of the trademarks of Spring-Heeled Jack. Cahill's sources provide accounts that seemed ripped straight from basically Jack's legend. For example, one teenage boy claimed, "He jumped out at me from nowhere and spit blue flames in my face." Another witness, a farmer, recalled an even stranger encounter. "My dog cornered the Flash. A giant of a thing, all in black, with long silvery ears. I thought it was some kind of wild animal. So I shot it. And when I did..."
American!
Yeah, hell yeah. "And when I did, the damn thing just laughed and jumped over my 8-foot-high back fence in one leap." With descriptions like these, it's hard to believe that no one in Provincetown was aware of the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack, which had begun exactly a century earlier. So was the Black Flash simply another case of myth-making shaped by old legends, or was there really something or someone stalking the darkened streets of Cape Cod?
There's another very interesting case, and it comes from the Czech Republic, called the Razorblade Man.
Hell yeah, the Razorblade Man sounds awesome.
So this happened during the Second World War, so 1939 to 1945. A shadowy figure known as the Spring Man or the Razorblade Man was said to haunt the blacked out streets of Prague. According to one study of the period, he was rumoured to leap from murky alleyways into the paths of people walking by. At the same time, stories spread of a slashing figure known as the Razorblade Man, suggesting that the fear of prowling attackers was alive and well in wartime in Prague. Yet, despite these sinister rumours, many Czechs seem to take a certain enjoyment in the idea of the Springman. He became a kind of rebellious folk hero, defying the German-imposed curfews and evading both army soldiers and the Gestapo. His legend even inspired a 1946 animated cartoon, Springer and the SS. In this version, the Springman, he was depicted as a chimney sweep dressed in all black with a sock for a mask and springs in his shoes, which led Nazis on a wild chase through the darkened streets of the city. My sister, she actually lived in Prague for a while. So I sent her a message and I asked her, has she ever heard of the legend?
Yeah.
She
said no.
She did. She said no.
Oh, really?
So yeah, absolutely no help there. So.
Oh, okay, great.
So, and I know you listen to the podcast. Useless.
Jeez, you could have just made something up. We would have repeated it.
Then there's the case of there's also another case called the mysterious Houston Batman. So this sighting marks a shift in Jack's legend, transforming him from a paranormal demon or cryptid into something more aligned with UFO folklore. So it all began on a humid night in June 1953. Hilda Walker, a young housewife, was sitting on the porch of her home in East 3rd Street in Houston. She was accompanied by neighbours 14-year-old Judy Mayer and 33-year-old Howard Phillips. So the night, it was peaceful until something shocking unfolded before them. Walker later described the encounter. So she said, 25 feet away, I saw a huge shadow across the lawn. I thought at first it was the magnified reflection of a big moth caught in a nearby streetlight. Then, the shadow seemed to bounce upward into a pecan tree. We all looked up, and that's when we saw it. Perched in the tree was a man-like figure, standing around 6.5 feet tall with bat-like wings extended from his back. It was surrounded by a strange yellow glow and appeared to be dressed in a tight-fitting black or grey clothing. The three stunned witnesses, they watched for around 30 seconds as a figure swayed on the branch before it just simply vanished into the air. We heard a loud swoosh over the housetops across the street. It was like a white flash of a torpedo-shaped object. I heard so much about flying saucers, I thought all the people telling stories they were crazy, but now, I don't know. I don't know what to believe. I may be nuts, but what I saw, whatever was there, I sat there stupefied. I saw it, and nobody can say I didn't.
You tell him, girl.
Phillips then added, we looked across the street and saw a flash of light rise from another tree and take off like a jet. So the next morning, Walker filed a police report detailing the encounter. And according to cryptozoologist Ken Gerhard, in the 1990s, multiple employees at the Bel Air Theatre in Houston, they also claimed to have seen a gigantic helmeted man crouching on the rooftop downtown. So these sightings of the Houston Batman and Spring-Heeled Jack, they do bring another cryptid to mind. The Mothman. I got him in there. So could they all be connected? Are these sightings just reincarnations of the same entity, adapted to fit the fears and folklore of different times? Who knows? Maybe they're all one. And so, I guess the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack, it comes to an end, until he decides to leap back into the public side once again.
There you go, folks. That is the story of Saucy Jack. The Spring-Heeled legend, the man himself. I hope he does leap back into the public's imagination once again. He's pretty cool character, honestly. Right. Yeah, I want to start reading those Penny Dreadfuls. Yeah. I kind of dig it.
We get him on the podcast. It'd be great.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Hey, you get him, the Mothman, you get the Witches of Salem. We'll have a good time.
We'll figure it out. The call could be one. Who knows?
Yeah. All right, folks. There you go. Hope you enjoyed the episode. That was a lot of fun. To do today's episode, we do enjoy a good spookster.
I feel like we hit all the marks. We got cryptids. We got aliens. We got
Mothman.
I got Mothman in there.
Yeah. That last
you mentioned Salem. I didn't mention it.
Well, I mean, I mentioned it for your sake.
And I appreciate that.
All right, folks. Thanks so much for listening to this whole episode. As always, please, rate us 5 stars and tell all your friends about That Chapter Podcast. Or else.
We tried being nice.
Yeah, we tried being nice, and we decided maybe threatening will work better. Well, let's find out. Let's see how this goes.
Let's see how it plays out.
Yeah. All right, folks. Talk to you soon.
I'll see ya.
All right. Thanks. And capable of leaping entire foot tops. Sorry. Foot tops. I can't speak.
Frank, my mouth is dry. Go into the bathroom, splash the water on it.